What is going on today, folks? Today we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about the difference between collecting and playing. And most of the time today we spend on this channel talking about collecting. But playing is also a big aspect. I am obviously a past player and I have played a good amount of games, but as I'm getting more into the LGS side, I am leaning more into the collecting side. But playing is also a very important aspect. And I was actually talking to another LGS owner today, and we were talking about Flesh and Blood. And Flesh and Blood is very interesting because they kind of have this different dynamic where in the beginning of the game, they were mostly about, well, I don't know if they were mostly about, but there was a lot of like high investors and collectors and first edition and cold foils and yay and everything. And the product was super hard to get. And that drove prices and that drove popularity up. But that also made people like, oh, it's a bubble and no one's playing it and no one can play it. And so it became kind of an interesting turmoil. And I was telling him, I'm like, well, I think that's the direction MetaZoo will go. Because right now, MetaZoo is very hard to get. I mean, Nightfall's a little bit easier to get, but still, it's over MSRP. It's harder to get. It's for Cryptid first edition is really hard to find. Second edition is right around the corner. We're getting it soon. We know that. But I believe that this is something that really needs to be taken to a key, especially with all these new Kickstarter TCGs that are coming out, that they really need to focus on one, collectability, and two, playability. But anyways, one of the big reasons I want to talk about this today is because I was thinking about it, and I believe it's MTG Rocks, and the link will be in the description, said every Magic card should be $1. And I thought a lot about that, and I'm like, from a player aspect, if every card was at most $1, that would make playing a lot cheaper, and that would make people getting into it a lot cheaper. However, how would that affect the long-term value of said game like Magic? I mean, I know that I am very interested in collecting old Magic, and I know there's a lot of new Magic too, like, where's the Crimson Vow? I know that these collector boxes aren't doing the greatest as of now, but I do believe in this long term and collector boxes in general. But anyways, that's besides the point. Honestly, I just think that there needs to be a very fine line. Like I was saying with Flesh and Blood. Flesh and Blood went like this. They were like at least this is how the market kind of answered. Collectability, 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 playability, 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 playability. And now they're way up here at playability. So now I feel like the company needs to pivot and say, okay, how can we stabilize and do both? Because right now, the teeter-totter is drastically playability, collectability. And I feel like that's something that a lot of games are kind of, one end or the other. I know Pokemon is all about collectability. I know there are people that play, but what is it, like 90... I mean, we've talked about it before on the channel. 95% of Pokemon players don't play or will never play in a sanctioned tournament. I know Magic's very similar, although they won't play in sanctioned events. But I think Yu-Gi-Oh! Is obviously significantly higher. But I know that Flesh and Blood obviously is what we've been talking about mostly, is definitely the biggest one that I feel like is following this trend very well. And that is why I think it's one of the newer games that will succeed. One of the games that I personally feel like that kind of also walks this line well is, as much as I hate to say it, is Digimon. It just came to my mind. Digimon is a game that I feel like the playability is good, and the collectability is also there, because I was seeing this other stat the other day, and it's that Digimon has like more stock in it than like. It might have been Microsoft. It was some big tech company, and it was like doubled them just because how much Digimon has encompassed in over the years. Even though it may not be as big as Pokemon, it's still huge in comparison to other animes and other card games like that. Anyways, just getting back to the playability and collectability, I feel like there needs to be something said about how cards are $1, as MTG Rocks said. If every card was $1, well, then playing would be affordable, but then collecting would be here and playability would be here. There needs to be a fine middle ground. I personally believe right now, Magic, let's pick on Modern Horizons 2. I was checking the prices for that because we might have a box opening coming up for that. I haven't decided whether I'm going to keep it sealed. But anyways, there's a lot of cards that are decently priced. They are like 20 to maybe 40 to maybe $50. And some of them are mythic, some of them are lands, and I mean the lands they might be a little expensive for that, but mythics I feel like in that set specifically are very well priced because they're not too much, they're not too cheap. Granted, I'm sure there are lots of them that I'm missing, and you guys can tell me in the comments which ones I'm missing, but that is a great example of how playability and collectability meet. Because there are a lot of collectible things in that set that make people want it, like fetch lands and some of the chase mythics, like I think it's Solidarity or something like that is one of the top mythics. But anyways, kind of makes me think about when I went back to my Digimon or Dragon Ball days, both companies made by Bandai, and they handle playability very well. And collectability, they kind of piggyback onto the arms of the IP, which I mean is fine. A lot of people like it, a lot of people don't, but there's not a lot of like, oh my gosh, this is super chaseable and I need to collect it. Digimon did have in the most recent set, they had an Omnimon, which is like one of the bigger characters, and it was I think one per like a couple cases, and it's worth a couple $100, so good for them. But it just drove prices way down because there's nothing else of value. I honestly think that is very similar to what is happening with MetaZoo and Nightfall, because there's not a lot of like really chase cards in Nightfall. I know we haven't been doing as many Nightfall videos. I really still want that old scratch, but we will think about getting there. I'm still kind of torn on that. But I really think that there needs to be a very, very fine line. And honestly, I think it needs to lean a little bit more over to the collectible side because there's the stability. The collectability makes it, in my opinion, more stable of a game long term. Because you can have so many people collecting a game, and regardless of how playable it is, they're going to keep coming back. And they're going to keep like, this is good. But if you just have players that are like, oh, well, this is really cheap and I can play everything, well, then you make one mistake, one tiny mistake, this card's broken or it's way too powerful or this or that, you ruin the game. And especially with rarities, where you make it like some cards are really good or sometimes really bad, when they're low rarity and high playable, I'm kind of rambling today, but this is just kind of what's been on my mind, so I just want to share it with you all. But overall, I think that a game needs to be playable, needs to be collectible, and like I said, again, very fine line. But overall, I think that, and again, it does need to line more on the collectability side. But yeah, I think that's kind of where we're going to end this today, and yeah, see you in the future.